So I was looking forward to kind of like giving it a little bit more gas and charging around a little bit more,
Mhm.
kind of flexing the several months of training that we've been doing.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, so race day comes. Race started at 9, which is just
Got to
lovely.
sleep in.
It was great. The race took place at Lake Patten in Bellingham, and location was awesome. Awesome. It's just like a lake surrounded by trees, paths, kids playing, people swimming,
I was so
stand-up paddleboarding.
jealous.
It was great. The vibe was awesome. The race setup was great.
Welcome to the Low Tide Boys, a swim run podcast. I'm Chip.
And I'm Chris, and this is episode 232 of the show. We've got our first race report of the year for everyone this week. We just got back from racing Quest Race's Bellingham SwimRun, and we had a blast. It was great to be back racing again in the Pacific Northwest, and the vibes, the course, the community did not disappoint.
Yes, checked all the boxes on all those fronts.
Yeah, so we'll go over all the details, but friendly reminder that you can watch the show on YouTube or listen to it wherever you listen to all the good podcasts.
Yes, namely Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Those seem to be
There's
the
a couple
most popular
Google.
ones.
Well, Google Podcast doesn't exist anymore. It is YouTube Music now, so
Oh,
we'll see you all on the YouTubes there. But first race of 2024, first swim run race. I will say of the year.
first swimrun race. It worked out. A little bit of scheduling serendipity. I was going to be in Seattle for work, and it just happened that Bellingham SwimRun was happening the next day. So I chatted with Brent Molesbury, race director, who we know well from over the years, previous guest of the show. And yeah, I was like, hey, man, how's the race looking?
How's
And so I can't remember how it happened, Chipper, but I think
you were like, hey, I'm going to be up here for work. It's the same weekend as Bellingham SwimRun.
yeah, I'm
Do you
thinking
think
of doing it. Do you want to come
Do you
up?
think you could swing it?
And you're like,
And I was
let me get
like,
back.
Yeah, I like to do it. So then it happened.
Yeah, it was great. It was great. Yeah, and it was while I was up there, we got to visit the official bodyguard, medic, slow chauffeur, cook, the Low Tide Boys, Tommy Nozek. So it's great to see him and his kids. And then picked up Chipper, and then drove what was basically like 100 miles from Seattle straight to Bellingham to visit our dear friend, one half of the SwimRun Labs, Annie Molesbury. So it was super fun to hang out with her.
Yeah, it was great to see her. We have connected with her many, many times over the years with all the podcasts that we've done and all the gear talks, but very limited in-person exposure.
Right.
So it was great to hang out at her house in her backyard and chatted all things swimrun and beyond. But yeah, it's always great to hang out. I believe Brent was setting the course, so we didn't get to hang out with him, but we hung out at his house, which was very cool. And there was a bunny rabbit going around.
Yes,
There was cute little bunny.
There was. So I think we've mentioned this in previous episodes, but our training for this race, which is really just like, hey, this is really like Rust Buster race conditions or A races Whistler in about 3 weeks from the time that we're recording. Our training was probably the most different than it's ever been, where with Chipper's new job, we just haven't been doing a lot of training sessions together. We've done some swim runs together, but very few sort of key sessions. So we're really relying on our experience as a team to kind of just basically wing it.
And 10 plus years of being training partners and training activities. But yeah, I think that's this year we mentioned a little bit, or we mentioned it a few times before, but we have a new coach. I have a new coach. Chris is doing his coaches by committee situation. So a lot of sort of newness coming out there. And I think we've been really diligent about some things we were trying to be very intentional about this year. Obviously the run training and the swim training is happening. Both Chris and I were really wanted to be very intentional about strength training. And then for me, and Chris has already been pretty good about this, but for me, kind of the stretching, mobility, just sort of the taking care of the body piece has really been something that I've been focusing on a lot this year, along with the new coach and a little bit of a different training philosophy. So I was really excited. You had already sort of gotten your race. You've done a couple races already this year, although they were runs, but you kind of got that out of your system. But for me, this is my first one.
Really get out of your system.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah. So I think, in terms of strategy for this race, and we're going to do a leg by leg breakdown and give you sort of the whole vibes of everything that happened. So you could just be like you were there with us. But, sort of our strategy going in is like, hey, well, let's just see what we got. Let's just let the race come to us. Let's be smart and then, kind of see what happens. Right. And just we started with a tether and the plan was everything's going fine. We'll take the tether off at some point, and that's what we did. I think our mindset was really to just kind of be present and just kind of really kind of just trust our
Training
friendship,
and
our
yeah,
training, our experience. I mean, we've done a ton of swim runs at this point. So it was really, while there were some unknowns, even like we didn't write the legs on our paddles or
yeah,
we didn't do any of that stuff for this one. Not because we didn't take it seriously, but just because it's like, hey, you know what? Let's just this is an open book. But yeah, I would say before getting into race day, one thing I wanted to chat with you, Chipper, about was like, we say it a lot on the show, but just how important it is to support your local swim run. Like,
yeah,
I'm pretty much committing to always trying to do the swim runs that are at least in my time zone because it was a small race, but it was a great experience. Like, this is where people's journey, if it's Attila, if it's one water race, if it's some European swim run vacation, whatever it is, like, this is where it really starts. I
yeah,
think, like, thinking you're going to show up at Whistler as your first swim run, I mean, that's a pretty serious thing.
yeah.
This is much lower barrier to entry, family friendly. People do. One dude was doing it solo, was taking his shoes off like for the swims and putting them back on. So it was just
Father
like
son team
father
out
son team. It
there.
was great. It was great. Just all kinds, and all was welcome. And I think like I just love that part of it so
Yeah,
much.
the vibe was really good there, and I think that's a great point, Chris, because we chatted with a few folks when we were there, and some people were like, "Oh, I do this race in orcas," and I assume they're native to the Pacific Northwest, and
Hmm.
like, hey,
Hmm.
those are two great races to do, and maybe this is the only swim run that they do in the year, but I think giving them the opportunity to have a really positive swim run experience and just experience what you and I love so much about the sport, the community, the sort of being able to go in and out of nature and water and running and it just being a really unique experience. Like the local races are a lot of people's first and maybe only touch points to that. So I really am always going to emphasize that, and we always do that as well. So I agree with you there, and yeah, I mean, I really thought the people there were really cool. The community, some folks came up and said, "Hi, what's the new hotness on the gear?" It was like show and tell time. Where's the carbon paddles? Where's the Mondo pool buoy type stuff? It's always fun to talk shop with people.
For
And
sure.
I think unintentionally, this kind of ended up being a pretty good little Whistler sort of preview type course because I think we'll see a lot of the same terrain. I think the water temps feels like it might be the same. It's up in that half of the part of the country and the next country. So I think it's a really
Yes.
good,
Yes, it is. Yeah, for
really good
sure.
one.
I agree. I think it was the race itself, not to bury the lead because we're gonna go do a leg by leg breakdown, but it was super challenging on the runs and
Yeah.
on some of the swims as well. So there was some chop and stuff. So it was really gave us like a full experience. But I remember mentioning this to you during the race is, I had this memory
Go
where
right.
yeah, not well
Not
that
that.
too, that
That
too.
okay.
But I think it was during the long run, the 4 mile run where I was like, hey, do you remember when we did Swim Run California or California Swim Run, and it was 2018, and it was our first
Yes,
swim run, and I just kind of I felt what other people felt there
I
because
think
I
so.
think
Yeah,
people were looking at us. I mean, we were. I think it's safe to say we're the most experienced swim runners there.
probably.
Next to Annie who wasn't racing. So it really felt like, hey, when we did our first race, we saw these two
Just
Euro
like,
dudes who were like, man,
oh,
like
they have a
they
tether.
got
They
it
have it
all.
figured
They're gonna use
out.
the
Yeah,
tether, like the whole thing. And I felt like, that was us. Like now,
yeah.
now we're the weird
I
Euro
mean,
dudes.
we were certainly dialed in from like a kit perspective, and from the one
Looking
thing we can
correct.
control is the looks of do we look like we're prepared there? And talking a little bit about the mindset and the strategy. Yes, we hadn't done a lot of training together, but I certainly didn't feel like there was a going to be a big disconnect. We had done enough training to where it's like, oh, on our little big tree, no, our big trees loop or whatever we would do, it's not, oh, Chris is like 30 minutes up the mountain. I'm like, dragging ass way behind. Like I felt like it was going to be a close enough situation for that. And I have been really feeling my swim training and felt really trained up. So I think for me, like I guess I was looking to impress and not depress on the swims. So I think I was hyping myself up too much. I about the swims. And I think that's why we tethered on the first one, because I was like, I might go ballistic on this thing. I'm not sure if I can hold back. And you were right there.
Yeah, yeah.
And which I think was, yeah, well, we don't want to get into the leg by leg
Mhm.
quite, but yeah, I agree with you on like the mindset piece was one, let's go out there, have fun, doing what we love to do, see where the fitness is, give it a good, we kind of estimated it would be somewhere around the 2 hour mark for us, just like back of the napkin kind of math, which I think is like a little bit of a harder effort for us compared to maybe a 5 or hour to La World Series distance race or something where we're going to be more of in that endurance focus. So I was looking forward to kind of like giving it a little bit more gas and charging around a little bit more,
Mhm.
kind of flexing the several months of training that we've been doing.
For sure, for sure. Yeah. So race day comes. Race started at 9, which is just
Got to
lovely.
sleep in.
It was great. The race took place at Lake Patten in Bellingham, and location was awesome. Awesome. It's just like a lake surrounded by trees, paths, kids playing, people swimming,
I was so
stand up paddleboarding.
jealous.
It was great. The vibe was awesome. The race setup was great. We need to talk about what was it? The New Zealand snail?
New Zealand mud snail.
New Zealand mud snail. So apparently they're an invasive species, and we're all about wildlife, and I guess that's the wildlife we got to worry about. Fast forward to the end of the race, we had to dip our shoes in
Vinegar
and water
solution.
and then put them in the freezer for 24 hours so that to make
I
sure
just
we
took
weren't.
mine
Me too.
40,
Me too.
48 hours. They were like a chunk of ice, and I just like threw them into the garage. I'm like, these will thaw out at
Yeah,
some point.
yeah. So that was pretty interesting. I don't remember seeing any snails, but yeah, that's kind of what it was. The race started promptly at 9. We got a briefing right before from Brent, the race director, as to all the turns. And I will say, like, honestly, like on paper, the course looks super confusing to me.
That
And
is,
again, we didn't
yeah,
write stuff on paddles, but we're like, it'll be fine. We'll just follow directions. Like,
Yeah.
we're not trying to do anything ridiculous here, like get lost in Bellingham, Washington, for instance. So yeah, but it turns out like as we were racing, it wasn't that
Yeah,
difficult.
like
It was pretty, course markings were good.
yeah, absolutely. There was a lot of like across the lake, back across the lake, run a circle, back across the lake, which I think the course was, you saw a lot of different variety. It wasn't like, oh, I've been on this trail 3 times already, or I swam this part of the lake. You hit
Mhm.
all different touch points in around Lake Patten. But yeah, like looking at it and the zigs and the zags between all the swims, I'm like, oh boy, this could be kind of confusing. But
Yeah.
major props to Brent and the other folks that set the race up. They actually kind of didn't drop the other buoys, and they adjusted the race course and the markings as the race unfolded. So when everyone was done with swim one, they pulled that Dorito chip buoy and moved it somewhere else to like swim 6 or whatever. So that way it really
Yeah.
eliminated confusion, but it was clearly marked. And again, I think what
Yeah,
we
they
were
did a good
really
job.
kind of hoping for and trusting was like, when you're out there and you come, it's going to be obvious where you go. And it very much was. So I
Yeah.
appreciated that. It was well marked throughout.
Yeah, and I actually think it was a pretty cool course. So you're swimming, zigzagging across the lake, as Tripper mentioned, and then you had these sort of loops, which were, for the most part, they were all hilly.
Yeah.
They all had some really cool nature. Just kind of wanted to stop and hug all the trees. But the race, as mentioned, the race started promptly at 9, and the first leg was just sort of a short 3/4 mile, or I'm sorry, a third of a mile to get to the first swim, which was basically like tied for the longest swim of the day. It was 800 yards swimming straight across. And what I loved about this race, and I remarked on it
We were in charge of
immediately,
it.
was that when it started, we didn't have like the SwimRun NC problem where everyone just takes off at like 5-minute pace. Everyone just jogged it
Yeah.
out, which was great. It's
Well,
what I always
we
want. in a
sort of
swim
were
run.
able to dictate that a little bit. I think because we had the look down, so to speak. People sort of were like, oh, these guys know what they're doing. And then I don't want to say they like conceded to us leading it, but I felt
Yeah.
like we were able to dictate a little bit. I was looking on the splits. We still went out faster, the fastest run of the day, but yes, not dipping into the 6s or something. I think we were somewhere in the
Yeah.
7:30s or 7:15s, but very manageable to kind of like keep the heart rate up. And then, yeah, like charging right into that swim, really excited.
And I will say, yeah, so went into swim run, which is 800 yards, like straight across the lake, which was felt a little cold at the beginning. But what I will say, I knew we were going to have a good race because our transition was just like chef's kiss. If you're watching on YouTube, chef's kiss. It was, we're prepared, went in, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
Out, we're gone. And we were first into the water, and then there was someone on my feet, and it turned out to be a solo female racer who was just like an incredible swimmer.
Yeah.
So
dominant.
we kind of stayed with her for a while, and then we get away on the runs a little bit. She catch us in the water for a little bit of the race there. But that first swim, 800 yards, Chipper, you led the swims, except for the last one.
Yeah.
I told you before the race is like, I'll be fine on the swims, whatever you want to do. Like, I'm here for it.
I don't know why. Not that I have a doubt, but like, I know we talk it up on the show, like, oh, Chipper leads and Chris, he's like sandbagging in the back.
I'm fine with that.
I hit this swim and I'm like, I just, I felt like I needed to get it out of my system. And I'm like, I'm going to give it a up tempo thing. It's an 800 swim. So it's not like,
it's not a sprint.
Yeah, not a sprint, but I put some gas on it and like, 100 yards in, 200, there's Chris just like right on my feet. I wasn't feeling the tether like stretch or anything. We did tether up. This is our thinnest tether yet. And I think it works well for us for what we need at this point in our swim run journey.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Yeah, I thought that swim was uneventful. The water, as I mentioned, felt a little bit cold going in. I was like, did I just make a huge mistake?
You had the VIG on.
Yeah, so let's just pause here and just do the what we wore for gear. So I had a sleeved VIG with arm sleeves and I had a kangaroo top underneath, had my surf ears, I had my usual goggles, my Aquasphere Cayennes, and the Terex.
Yeah, and the Frank Pros.
Yeah, Frank Paddle Pros.
And the Keel Plus.
Yes.
And I brought my VIG
socks.
and CEP socks.
I just did a terrible job.
I'll help you. Well, we pretty much matched for like half of the kit, so I think I have a good handle. But I bought a new kangaroo top and a new VIG. I don't know what it is. I can't pull the trigger on wearing the VIG. Like, I get too scared that I'm going to get cold, which if you're not getting cold, I have several pounds on you of insulation. I will be totally fine. I just need to buck up Buttercup and just bust the VIG out. But I wore the Uto.
Sleeved Uto.
No, sleeved Uto, no arm sleeves though. So I did go no arm sleeves. I had the CEP tall socks, the Arc'teryx 240s. I'm using the Frank Pro Blue Steels, the newest hotness from Frank Paddle. Go check those out. frankpaddle.com or .se. Go find Frank Paddle. These are the new ones. They have a little same fin shape, but they have a little bit of texture on them. So I really like that. I used the kangaroo top, and then I had my Arena, like these ridiculous open water goggles. I think they were like $50 or something like that. Some ridiculous thing.
Yeah.
There. And a few things I did not bring that in retrospect was a learning for me, but maybe we can touch on that after. But I failed to bring any water fluid vehicle. So a collapsible cup or even a flask. And I think that came back to bite me, but we'll talk a little bit more about that. But to continue on with the leg by leg breakdown, they had 800 swim. I thought it was going well. I'm like, oh damn, yeah, 800 it's a while to be on the gas. And then, I thought I don't know how often were you looking behind or anything, but I felt like we had probably made a gap or had some space, but I looked over and there was someone else swimming on the side. I was like, oh, let's go. It's exciting.
Yeah. So got out of that swim, transition was fine. You started leading the runs, and I was kind of letting you lead the runs because you just did this big effort, and I didn't want to already start just like, not giving you a chance to recover, I guess.
Well, I didn't give myself a chance to recover because I like took it out pretty quick, or like I just kept charging on. So I think, kind of in the sort of strategy and mindset of like, this is going to be a hard 2-hour effort here. Like that was sort of how I was going after it. Hopefully it wasn't too slow for
No, I mean, it was fine, but I was like, all right, whatever he wants to do is
Yeah.
fine because, I feel like I've just been doing just tons of hill mountain running
Yeah.
since January,
Your run
essentially.
training was very well suited for this sort of
Yeah, which actually, we'll
trails.
say, stick a pin in this for later, but I actually think it positions, I feel like well positioned from a fitness perspective for Whistler because of the
Yeah.
hill training. But yeah, that run was 1.4 miles, super cool, totally wooded, like
Just amazing
awesome trees,
trails.
ferns, like all kinds of stuff.
Good shade cover as well. So even if it
Yeah.
was, if the race happened at noon, it was a little bit warmer of a day, you still had good coverage from being in under the canopy of
Yeah,
the
it was a
trees.
beautiful day. I think it was like it's in the 70s.
It was one of the nicer days of the year, I
And
believe.
I had made the decision to wear the arm sleeves because I just wanted to make sure I'd be okay for that first swim, especially being in the back. You don't really get as much. You don't have to expend as much effort,
Yeah.
which is why I love being in the back of the draft. So I kept the arm sleeves and I actually kept them on until way later, actually later than I thought, just because there was
Same.
so much in and out. That was like, you know what, it's not bothering me. It's better for the swim, so I just left them on. But that 1.4 mile run, pretty uneventful, really well marked. There was one part where Brent had prepared everyone like, run 2 kind of goes the opposite way of run 5. So there's like different colored flags just where this one intersection happens. And that was totally
Very
well
clear,
marked.
yeah.
Again, like when he was saying it, I was like, but when we saw it, we're like, oh yeah, obviously this makes perfect sense. So that was good. And that went into the second swim, which was basically like the second longest swim of the day, which was 600, which basically went back towards the start, which is pretty cool because you got to kind of, there was an aid station that they used for the whole race.
Yeah.
And I think, how did you feel leading that swim?
That one felt good as well, and there was some wind that was coming out. So this was on a lake, and there was definitely some I guess a current.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah, there was
certainly
some pull. There was some chop as well from the wind. So it wasn't like, oh, it's just glass and you're just going across the lake. Like it was a good opportunity. I was like, oh, like I kind of like that. Like you definitely get a lot of that sort of stuff in Casco Bay or even some of these ocean swims. Obviously, during more of an ocean swim, you're going to have a little bit more of that. So I kind of like that stuff and to cut your teeth on it for the year.
And frankly, pro tip: if you're doing Worlds, if you're signed up for Worlds, or you're thinking about Worlds, you want every swim at every swim run to just be like the gnarliest possible, because that's the only way you're going to be uber prepared for anything that could come at you at Atala. So yeah, anytime there's chop or current, I'm like, good,
let's go. Yeah. So I always like look at that and don't think negatively of it. I'm like, okay, this is a good time to practice.
Yeah.
Really worked on the sighting. It was easy to sight. Put my anti-fog stuff in the goggles. The shark spit stuff works well. And yeah, that swim, kind of back across easy. There was a couple buoys to come up then, and there was an aid station there. And it was sort of off to the side. We would have had to kind of go off where they had us running to go do it. And I should have stopped is what I'm trying to say. Or I should have brought a flask with myself to at least like fill up or have some water. But passing that, I think because of the more intense effort I was giving out, could have used the hydration later on in the race. But yeah, then we charged off towards the other side of the lake for almost a 3/4 mile.
Tough one
run.
It was a pretty tough one with some real sort of like shit kicker hills to what went into
Very
actually
challenging, all the run.
The hardest swim of the day. It was the shortest swim of the day. It was 330 yards on paper, but it was sort of at the edge of the lake and all the wind and all the current was sort of going in that direction. So it was actually, I mean, as rough water swim as I think I've done all year.
Yeah, I mean, certainly. And yeah, you kind of cut it across. And this was when Chris was yelling at me a couple times. I heard him once, but I try to sight every several strokes, and we've been practicing that. The coach will give me like some, do 5 strokes, then sight, do a 50 like that, do a couple of those to kind of get that practice. But, nothing beats the practice of being out there and doing it during a race simulation. And this was a great opportunity to practice that. But yeah, some of my sighting was a little off. I I don't know if I was swimming the wrong way or the current was
Yeah.
taking me.
Well, yeah, it's like you kept kind of like the
I was
buoy was sort of towards our right. You kept going left, and I every time I saw that, I saw because I could see from your feet because they would just kind of like
oh,
turn. So I'd be like,
I need a
right,
yeah.
right.
I heard you one time, and there was this group of 3 or 4 trail runners that were going around, and we saw them
Well,
like
I
6
think
times.
I think they were following a friend who was
Okay.
I think finished maybe second or third
Oh,
actually.
nice. It
So
was cool to
so
see them. They were nice and very cheering us on.
they
They
clearly knew those trails because they
yes.
knew every time we were going by, they were there like waiting for their buddy, which was yeah, it was, and they were really supportive. It was nice to always get a cheer,
Yeah.
and they'd be like, "Yeah,
Feel
it's
like,
this
"Yeah,
way."
great job. There's someone behind you." I'm like, "Oh, man. Okay, let's go." It's like
Yeah, so that swim was the hardest swim of the day, I would say.
yeah.
Except the last one is always what it is, but yeah, it was super technical with the current, and you had to breathe to your right because if you breathe to your left, you were just getting like splashed in the face. So there was
I was
that was
dealing
great.
with that a little bit as well as like, yeah, like luckily I can do bilateral breathing, but for some reason it took me, probably like 200 of the 300 yards to figure out what side I should actually be breathing on. But, I made it. And then that one, was that the swim? Was that the exit that was very
Yes.
Tala-esque? Because it kind of went on this rock, which if you've done Tala, it's like how all the exits are. You
Yeah.
kind of like go up like a seal on your belly and
Mm-hmm.
crawl up. So that was a really cool exit.
Yeah, I used my Frank paddle as like an ice pick just to
Oh
like,
yeah.
hold the
Actually,
thing.
that's probably where I got this scratch on my leg.
Probably, yeah, that
Yeah,
makes sense to be that
that
one
would
because
probably would be.
that was the scratchy
Yeah, that was
one.
scrambling.
So we scrambled up, and then we had about a 1.17 mile run, which again, just like you're like going flat for a little bit, and then you just do a loop up into them hills, and you're running over forests and ferns and
Yeah.
really cool, just really cool trails. Lots of people out sort of recreating or walking their dogs and stuff, which was pretty fun.
None of these runs, I felt there was never any break. You were either going, like that maybe that's, I was like, my heart rate was never like one, we were going at the harder effort, but like, hey, you're either going up a hill or charging down or doing something like there's no, oh, here's a kind of a nice area. You can sort of settle into a nice pace
Mhm.
or kind of lock it in and manage the effort. It was very undulating, beautiful trails, but you had different every step almost.
Yeah, for sure. So that was super fun, and then that led into swim 4, which was about a 400-yard swim. Again, kind of crossing across the lake from one side, from basically south to north, and then doing a smaller run again past sort of the start finish area, and then swimming across the lake for another 800, which then took us to the longest run of the day,
Yeah.
which was basically 4 miles. And this was definitely like the most
Yeah.
super challenging, but also just like really, really nice. And I think that's where Chipper, when we got out of that last 800, we took the tether off because we had a long run. I took my arm sleeves off
Yep.
and just kind of, took the paddles off, just kind of got set for a long run, which honestly, there's probably a little mini pro tip there too. It's like, hey, if you know you have a long run coming up, it can actually be almost like relaxing and a
Yes.
mental break to be like, all right, I'm taking the goggles off. I don't have to worry about dropping these things. I'm putting them in my kangaroo top. I'm sort of getting like
Yeah. You're
opening
gonna
up the
settle in.
suit.
You're gonna settle in for a longer effort,
Yeah.
4 miles, 30 minutes, 40 minutes, 50 minutes, depending on
Mhm.
whatever.
Yeah, right.
And by
Exactly.
that part of the race, I was kind of heating up a little bit from some of the running that we had done. So I was looking forward to, unzipping, and I was looking forward to popping the cap and kind of doing some of these
Mhm,
things that,
mhm.
like you just mentioned,
And
kind of settling
that's
into
where
the
you were
effort.
like, I wish I would. Why didn't I wear the VIG?
Yeah, I think that was when I was like, I should have wore the VIG. But yeah, that run was very similar. Some of it was very manageable, kind of switchbacky, remind us very much of our big trees, like kind of
Mhm,
switchback
mhm.
trails, which, we've probably run that thing 50 times now after living here for, nearly a
Minimum.
decade. But yeah, it was good. Definitely got hikey in some areas. I don't know if you did that because you heard me laboring behind, or it felt like some of it was actually pretty steep that it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
you kind of want to hike this out a little bit.
Yeah.
Mm.
So something happened to me on that run where I feel like, and I've talked about this on shows like from way back in the day, like I don't know. It was just, I honestly have spent a lot of time thinking about it because I don't know if it's just being in particular in like the Pacific Northwest woods that just kind of like fires me up. But like my energy levels were sky high. I will
Did you hit the
say
caffeine gel maybe?
I did hit the caffeine gel about a half hour before. So that's
Oh, okay.
probably, and I timed it because I wanted to, might as well use it for like sort of the meat and potatoes
Yeah.
of the thing. And I've been basically all year, I've been experimenting with timing and amount of caffeine because I don't usually have any. So my max is like 30,
I'm just
which is,
sucking down 100,
just
100
pretty funny.
milligram.
But hey, if 30 works, that's great.
Hey.
But so I started feeling like really, really good. And this was maybe like an hour and 30 minutes in. And so I definitely had like a lot of, energy and enthusiasm,
Yeah.
but we'd untethered. And yeah, so it's also a team sport. So I could be full of piss and vinegar, but makes no point for me to just like Billy goat up this thing.
Yeah.
So, well, yeah, I noticed it sounded like you need a little bit more hikey thing. And because again, we've been doing this for so long, you didn't have to say anything. It's just like, all right, well, this is steep.
Yeah, I
Right?
mean, it
Let's
worked
just
out.
hike
It
it.
worked out well, and about that point, and I had been actually keeping on top of my new nutrition pretty well. I took a caffeine P Precision Fuel and Hydration 30 with the caffeine 20 minutes before. I took 290s with me, so targeting 180 grams of carbs over the 2 hours, and
Mhm.
I did a whole 90 on that 4 mile run.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I didn't. I
I
guess I didn't see any of that. So
and
were you feeling your energy levels just kind of
It was
tanking?
more of like a heat thing, and I was starting to feel really thirsty and dehydrated. We did stop at the aid station at the end of swim 4, and you let me borrow your cup. I took 2 things of water, but I really should have probably just had like a soft flask and just filled that up. Or
Yeah.
had more water throughout or at the other aid station. And I think I probably could have been in a better place. I wasn't like, bonking my brains out a la orcas,
Mhm.
but yeah, I was feeling more like, yeah, I was feeling more zapped than I really would have wanted to, I think
Right.
at that point. But yeah, like kept on top of my fueling, and that did help, keep gas in the tank. But yeah, we climbed up that one, took a few hike breaks on there, and but then kind of once we got to the top, this nice flowy descent, which re-energized me for sure. And then whilst I was not, and then we kind of hit the flats like by the dog park and made our way back. We knew what, because on the first run, you run past the last swim entrance. So we knew
Yeah.
where it was. Like, okay, when you get to the boat dock, you only have, you know,
Yeah,
30
and this
meters or
is and this
something.
is like insight into our race strategy. So while we were in the forest, we were like sort of planning that. So we're like, hey, when we hit the dock, that's when
Let's
we'll
start
start
cabbing
cabbing
up
up
and
because
everything.
it's going to be right up from that. So we were already kind of thinking about how we're moving. When we got out of the forest, and as Chipper mentioned, it was like a dog park and it was pretty flat, just like on a gravel trail.
Yeah.
Again, kind of heading back home. There was a I don't know, public restroom, and there was a water fountain there. So I was like, you want to hit the
Yeah, I
water?
did take a couple sips there, and I was like, we only got whatever 20 minutes left or 15 or
Yeah.
10 or whatever, but
Yeah,
yeah,
and I noticed that you were kind of falling off the pace even on the flat. So I was like, "Hey, do you want me to lead the swim because I'm feeling like pretty
you were,
spry?"
yeah, and I was like, go for it. I felt I was falling off a little, but when I actually like looked back on Strava, and I was like, we were still going a pretty decent clip for, at the end of like a 2 hour tempo paced effort. So I
Mhm.
was like, not beating myself up so much after seeing like the pace
Yeah, no.
on
And
that.
and I should
And
bears mentioning again, like we didn't sign up for this race to just like win, but we were leading essentially the entire time. So it was just like
yeah,
us putting forth effort that we thought was going to keep us in that
yeah.
position, I
I
guess,
mean,
but
yeah, and like, right. I mean, I think, yeah. So, and then, yeah, you led the last swim. We didn't tether on that. Obviously, you handled it just fine. I was hanging out back there. We were swimming side by side for a little bit. And I was like, what am I gonna just get behind Chris?
I saw that and I was like, "What are you doing, dude?"
I don't know what
I'm like, "All right."
I was doing. I was enjoying the water.
And that swim did feel
It
good
did
getting to
feel
that
really
last one.
good.
Whew.
Yeah. And then we got out, and it was like a little jog across the thing, and we were done. But yeah, we we finished,
Yeah. So our stats, we finished in 2 hours and 9 minutes, which was good because we would have finished in 2 hours. We would have just like ran straight into the short course people that were
Yeah.
starting the race because they started at 11. So yeah, if you want to try swim run, you want to start a race at 11 in the morning. This is a race for you.
Yeah, there you go.
It was good enough for first overall and first place teams, obviously, which was, unexpected. My wife Susan asked me, well, how did I feel about that? And I'm of two minds. It's like, hey, 46 years old, anytime I can win anything, I'm
Yeah,
gonna
I don't
take
have
it.
many opportunities
I'm
to
gonna
win
take it,
races, so,
right? I'm gonna take it.
very cool.
But I think, you know, it's a both and situation. It was also like it was clear to us that we were probably the most experienced people there by far. So
Yeah.
we had some advantages just in transitions. We probably saved, 10 minutes on other teams. And in fact, like the next team that was behind us, I think was around 10 minutes behind us.
Okay.
So I think in terms of our execution, I think we nailed it. I think as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, our race strategy was kind of just like base it on vibes and basically just like lean into just trusting our friendship and our experience and all the
Yeah,
all
the
the
training
stuff
and
we've
all
done
the
together.
yeah,
Even though we haven't done any training, sort of specific training like recently, we still have like the deep base in terms of our relationship
yeah.
and our communication style and everything. So it just like it was cool that our sort of intuition on that was right.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely, and I feel like we've done this a few times where we haven't been as peaked from a fitness perspective, where we've kind of swim run folks of like they ran and swam faster than us, but we did this whole thing together a little bit faster than they did, and we were able to
Mhm.
be a little bit faster overall. And I think this, we kind of put a lot of the pieces together, and yeah, like that first couple transitions, and these transitions were all pretty slick.
Yeah,
So I
and it
was
was
happy to see that.
I think like going into sort of final thoughts, mentioned it earlier. I love swim run. It's pretty obvious, but doing a hyper local race was just really, really fun. And again, I can't overstate the importance of supporting local swim runs like,
Yeah,
Swim Run Cape Cod, Swim Run NC, Swim Run Lake James, Mud Skipper, which is coming up again.
swim run Folsom.
Folsom, these things, like this is how the sport's going to grow. We need to grow the base. And the only way that happens is by supporting the race directors who are really just taking a risk to put these events on. I think like the long course had like 26 people total,
Okay.
teams and individuals,
Yeah.
so a pretty small event. But yeah, I loved it. I thought it was super fun. I've been wanting, we've been talking about trying to do
Yeah.
Brent's race for years, but just again, serendipity helped us out on this one. And yeah, I'm super glad I did it. I'm super proud of our effort. Again, it's like,
Yeah.
hey, to win it 46, to win anything, I'm just going to take that.
Yeah. I mean, I thought it was a really good piece. And I think I personally was a little bit harder on myself on how the day went. And I sent an email to my coach, like, oh, here's what I was thinking, as she was asking me, and provided some good perspective that I think like that and some more time passing. Like, yeah, it was my first race of the year. I didn't, I got out there, like the fitness was there, probably should have had some more water, but overall, like a really fun day, a good day out there. Whistler's right around the corner. We got a nice couple weeks of build left in the training block, and then we'll be up in Canada is what's next for us. But yeah, I echo all your points, Chris. Certainly a great time, and everyone there smiles across the board that I saw.
Yeah, everyone. Yeah, it was great to chat with people afterwards, before and afterwards. They had a podium ceremony, which they did it early for us because we had to go catch flights, which was pretty funny if you saw that out on IG and stuff. Yeah, stoked. Definitely got extra stoked for Whistler,
Yes,
and I think that it also got me extra stoked to just continue kind of all the hill work I've been doing. In fact, I went out today. We're recording
I
this on a
saw.
Tuesday. And I was like, let me just get back out there because that's essentially going to be the reality of the back half of that course. So just kind of like embracing that, I think, super fun because I enjoy that anyway.
Yeah, and I took a peek. I have some pretty big weeks coming up here this week, next week, and then so two pretty big weeks, and have definitely hill reps, long hills in the trail. So like take the base and like start to dial in the specificity of it for the hills there. But yeah, really looking forward to Whistler.
Be fun.
Yeah, it'll be a good time. But
It's going to be fun. Yeah. Highly recommend Bellingham SwimRun for folks.
yep, absolutely. They're beautiful area. Very jealous that is some people's local
Yeah.
training ground for their own swim runs. Or we saw probably 10 people just like in doing open water swims. There's not motorized boats allowed out there.
Mhm.
Trail runner. I mean, it's just like an outdoor haven out
Yeah,
there.
it's
And
great
it's
to
like, oh man,
recreate.
it's like 10 minutes from Annie's house.
They
So
have a
jealous.
Costco.
They got a Costco that you can mule dairy products back over to Canada if you choose. And Fred Meyer, of course, always Fred Meyer.
But yeah, fun times. Stoked for the year. It's so different from last year where things just kept getting canceled and who knows
Yeah.
what, and hurricanes and fog and just races not happening. So it's nice to start the year off on a good note. And yeah, thank you everyone for listening, and for everyone who was out there who said hi to us. Appreciate you. And I guess that's it. Huh?
See you in Whistler.
That's it for this week's episode. Thanks so much for listening to the show. Make sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave a rating or review, since that's the best way to help other people discover the show and the sport of swim run.
Check out our website, lowtideboys.com. That's boys with a Z, for swimrun resources, including gear guides, tips, how-to videos, and so much more. Make sure to check out our meme page at The Low Tide Boys on Instagram. If you have any questions or suggestions for the show, send us a DM or email us at lowtideboys@gmail.com.
We'd like to thank Riding Easy Records for our show music, and of course our wives for their support and tolerance of our swim run and other activities.
Lots of activities.
Lots of activities.
Finally, you can support our efforts on Patreon. Until next time, get out there and go for a swim.
Then a run,
And then a swim,
then another run,
then another swim.
then run some more.
Just keep going.
Let's go.
And then stop at some point because,
And fuel. Don't forget to fuel.
Gotta fuel
Of course, yes.